What are the most hated bourbons picked by you guys? Let's find out. What's going on, everybody? Nathan here with the Everyday Drinker, bringing you guys a brand new video. Today, we're going over the most hated bourbons picked by you guys. I wanted to crowdsource this video and make sure that I got a good culmination of a bunch of people's opinions on the bourbons they hated. So I went through my YouTube comments, and I also made a post on my Patreon to see what bourbons those guys over there hated. And this is that list. So without further ado, let's get into bottle number one. Bottle number one is going to go to Willett Potstill. And yes, we have talked about Willett Potstill on the channel before. It is one of those bottles that looks absolutely fantastic. It's a really, really pretty Potstill style bottle, but what's inside of that bottle just is not good. I've heard many, many different opinions on it. My opinion on it, it tastes like cough syrup. A bunch of people say it tastes like dirt, tastes like cough syrup, too sweet, too bitter, too that, too whatever. Now, I have heard comments and people say, especially your drinking buddies, say that they have changed their recipe and that it is their own mash bill inside of that bottle now. But I myself do not want to be the guinea pig in that contest and see it for myself. I will take his word on it, and I will say that it might have gotten better, but at this point, I just do not know. Bottle number two. Bottle number two goes to Basil Hayden, and which Basil Hayden are we talking about? We're talking about every single one of them. They are way too overpriced, and they are thin on the palate. The subtle smoke, it's subtle because it's thin. The Cabernet finish, you really don't taste the Cabernet because it's so thin. Basil Hayden itself is not a bottle that I recommend for absolutely anybody. It's too expensive at 80 proof. It shouldn't even be considered a bourbon, but it is because it's at 80 proof, and I don't like it. But let's move on to bottle number three. Bottle number three, this is how you guys know that this is not my list. This is picked by you guys. It's going to go to one that I have on my shelf right now, Henry McKenna 10 year. Now, I understand the love-hate relationship for this bottle. It can be inconsistent, but the bottles that I have had and the samples and the taste of the other bottles that I've had have all been darn good stuff. But there are still those haters out there on this Henry McKenna that say it is just way too inconsistent. The price is getting jacked up, and I don't appreciate the price getting jacked up, but I do appreciate the darn good juice that's inside this specific bottle. So I'll stand by it and say that this bottle is darn good stuff, but the other ones out there that you guys don't enjoy, I will have to take your word on it, and that is why it's a top 10 hated bottle of bourbon. Bottle number four goes to Elijah Craig 18 year. Now, this is one that I personally I don't have the drive to hunt, only because of these two reasons. It's very low proof. I believe it's 90 proof, and it's super, super oaky. And nobody likes super, super oaky unless it has a little sweetness behind it. But what I've heard about the Elijah Craig 18 is that there's no sweetness behind that oak. It's just oak, bitter, oak, bitter, oak, bitter, and nobody enjoys that in a glass. Number five is going to go to Willit Green Top. Now, I know Kurt over at SLB enjoys those Willit Green Tops. It's one of his favorites that he mixes with. I believe that's what he said in a video a while back. But from what I've heard recently, these Willit Green Tops, they were hard to come by, but now they're a little bit more accessible. What I've heard is people don't enjoy it. I'm not quite sure why. I've heard it tastes like dirt. I myself don't want to spend the money on a bottle that doesn't really have a good backbone behind it. Now, the Willett Purple Tops, I've heard the single barrel bourbons, the 8 and 9 years, I've heard absolutely fantastic reviews about those, but the Willett Green Top Rye is one of those hated by you guys. Bottle number six is one that I most likely won't have for a very long time until I find it for that MSRP mark, and you might be wondering what that bottle is, and that bottle goes to Weller 12 year. Now, Weller 12 year is one of those bottles that is super, super allocated, super, super hard to find, and it pushes the price range of $300 when it is a roughly $40 MSRP bottle. Why do people hate it? Because they go hunting for it. They spend this an immaculate amount of money on it, and it's just a more hyped Weller Special Reserve. It's 90 proof, 12-year-old. The hype and the drive for the Weller 12 year is nothing compared to what the Weller Special Reserve is. I've got a bottle of the Special Reserve, and that's just not that good in my opinion, and I could only imagine that the 12 year isn't much different. Let's get into a couple of honorable mentions before we finish the list. Honorable mention number one is going to go to Angel's Envy Rye. I've heard mixed reviews about this, but the majority of the people, including Mike, one of my patrons and subscribers, put it on his bourbons that he hates. And what I've heard is that it's just too sweet. It's sweet and it's thin, and that's just not what you're looking for in a rye, especially one that's finished. Those should be a little bit more complex. They should be a little bit more bold in flavors. And from what I've heard, why people hate it is those two reasons right there. Honorable mention number 2 is going to go to Texas Bourbon Company. And I personally have had one sip of this, wasn't really the biggest fan of it. Had a little bit of a bitterness going on for it. Really didn't find too much complexity into it. And one of my subscribers, Mark, who's new in the bourbon game, picked up one of these bottles and it just was not his jam, didn't enjoy it. And I hope that he was able to find some new bottles that he really, really enjoys over this Texas bourbon. But that's enough of the honorable mentions, and let's move on to bottle number 7. Bottle number 7 goes to Blade & Bow. Now this is one that I personally haven't had, but Salty Lettuce, one of my patrons and loyal subscribers, sent me a sample of it, and I actually enjoyed it. It's comparable to Blanton's, and from my blind that I did with it, it is very comparable. They are very, 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 very similar. Now, if you cannot find Blanton's, the Blade & Bow is definitely a good pick in my opinion, but it's one of those bottles that is actually not enjoyed by a lot of people for the same reasons as others. People find it to be thin. Now, it is a 90 proofer. It's gonna be thin. It's not gonna be super robust and bold and flavorful. Nonetheless, it's one of those bottles and bourbons that not a lot of people enjoy. Bottle number 8 and 9 are going to come right now. Bottles 8 and 9 go to Russels Reserve 10-year and Eagle Rare 10-year. Now, this is a 50-50 for a lot of people. Either people love Russels and they hate the Eagle Rare, or they love Eagle Rare and hate Russels. Now, I've come to the conclusion that it's either they love the bitter, like some people find sweetness in this. I don't know where it's at. I don't know where they find the sweetness in this. But what a lot of people say about Eagle Rare is that it drinks a little hotter than that 90 proof. Now, I will agree with that. But I think that the flavor profile of the Eagle Rare fits my palate a little bit better than the Russels Reserve 10-year. And even though it does, I will agree, drink a little bit hotter than the 90 proof that it is. If you can find a single barrel of Eagle Rare, a store pick, they are 10 times better than the distillery releases, and I highly, highly, highly recommend Eagle Rare store picks over the regular Eagle Rare. Now, I myself will recommend Eagle Rare over Russels Reserve 10-year. I still have to get another bottle of Russels Reserve 10-year and compare it to this bottle and just see if it was a bad batch. But as you guys can see, I'm trying to get through this. It is lower than it was before. I tried it again. It is just not a good bottle. So I want to do that comparison here soon. And bottle number 10 is actually going to go to a distillery. It's going to go to Dickel. And Dickel is one of those distilleries that has a very distinct flavor. And inside of their bourbons, they have a very, very distinct mineral taste to them that not a lot of people enjoy. Now, there are a couple of bottles of Dickel that have this less pronounced, and people tend to enjoy them. Dickel is one of the largest distilleries in Tennessee, and they source a lot of their barrels and bourbon to a lot of different other smaller distilleries. And those distilleries put their bourbon, that bourbon, in their own barrels, do their own thing to it, put a different label on it. Now, Willit Green is one of those that get a lot of their bourbon from Dickel, source it from Dickel, and Willit Green I absolutely despise, and so does one of my patrons and subscribers, Josh. He just doesn't enjoy it. The only producer that I enjoy that gets sourced bourbon from Dickel is going to be Barrel Bourbon. And what they do is they do fantastic things with the Dickel influence. It's very, very muted in the barrels, Dickel bourbons. It's just not my cup of tea, as well as a lot of you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe, and let me know down in the comments if you have any other hated bourbons that were not listed on this list. Link to the store is going to be down below, as well as the Patreon. Make sure you guys go check that out. We're doing awesome stuff over there, and the store opens up on February 1st. Patrons, they are getting a 15% off promo code when the store goes live. So if you guys want your chance to get a 15% off promo code, make sure you go join up on the Patreon. But without further ado, this has been Nathan with the Everyday Drinker. Cheers.